President Trump says the United States needs Greenland for international security.
Said he would tariff Denmark at a very high level if it does not give Greenland to the United States.
Imagine the world's most powerful country losing control of the Arctic without a single shot being fired. No tanks, no bombers, no dramatic invasion. Just contracts, calculators, and a quiet strategy that blindsided Washington. And the twist? The winner wasn't Russia. It wasn't China. It was Canada. This is the story of how America's arrogance, fueled by tantrums and short-sighted politics, handed over a $50 trillion Arctic treasure to its polite neighbor. A defeat so humiliating that even NATO allies whispered about it behind closed doors. And yet, most Americans have no idea it even happened. Beneath Greenland's vast ice sheets lies a fortune so massive it could rewrite global power dynamics. We're talking about nearly $50 trillion worth of rare earth metals and strategic resources: molybdenum, niobium, graphite, gold. Metals you've probably never thought about, but ones your daily life literally depends on. The phone in your hand, the battery in your car, the guidance systems in America's fighter jets and hypersonic missiles, every single one of them needs these elements. And as the Arctic ice melts, the frozen frontier is opening up new shipping lanes that could become the Silk Road of the 21st century. Whoever controls this icy treasure chest doesn't just secure wealth, they secure the future of global trade, energy, and security. For decades, America assumed it would always dominate the Arctic. Military bases, nuclear submarines, sanctions, and aircraft carriers, Washington believed these tools guaranteed control. But as we'll see, that assumption rotted from within. Back in 2019, President Donald Trump shocked the world when he announced, almost casually, that the United States should buy Greenland. To him, it was the ultimate real estate deal. At first, many laughed. Denmark, which controls Greenland's foreign affairs, flatly rejected the idea. Their prime minister even called it absurd. But Trump didn't take no for an answer. He canceled state visits, insulted allies, and ranted about it on Twitter like a spurned customer at a casino table. Here's what he never understood. The Arctic wasn't a poker game where you push all your chips in on one bold move. It was chess, slow, deliberate, and about long-term positioning. And while Trump threw public tantrums, others quietly played the board. While Washington obsessed over headlines and sound bites, Canada was making moves nobody noticed. At the center of this strategy was Mark Carney, a Canadian banker with a reputation for precision. Carney wasn't tweeting or staging photo ops. He was in Ottawa, Copenhagen, and Berlin, carefully stitching together deals that would outmaneuver the United States. Canadian businessmen, often dismissed as boring, suit-wearing number crunchers, were signing contracts that would secure Greenland's most valuable assets. They didn't wave flags or threaten war. They built relationships. They treated Greenland as a partner, not a prize. And that simple difference, respect over dominance, changed everything. By 2024, Trump was back in power, and his obsession with Greenland hadn't cooled. In fact, it had intensified. Standing before Congress, he declared that the United States should take control of Greenland for its own good. It wasn't a slip. It was a doctrine. Behind the cameras, Pentagon officials dusted off Cold War blueprints. Invasion scenarios were redrawn. Submarine patrol routes were updated. To Washington, Greenland was no longer an ally. It was a target. But while Trump was busy demanding ownership, Canada had already set the board. Mining licenses were signed. Arctic shipping agreements were locked in. A coalition of Nordic and Canadian ventures had effectively tied Greenland's economy to Europe and Asia, not to Washington. By the time Trump made his big speech, it was already too late. The real game changer came in late 2024, when Canadian firms like Greenland Resources and Amarok Minerals offered something revolutionary: partnership. Instead of conquest or control, they proposed joint ventures that put profits directly into Greenland's treasury. A 30-year license to mine molybdenum, with revenues flowing into local infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and roads. For a nation of just 56,000 people, it was a lifeline. And here's the irony: American venture capitalists helped finance it. That's right. U.S. investors were unknowingly bankrolling the deals that shut their own government out of the Arctic. By March 2025, contracts were signed, and Greenland's resources were flowing into European markets, with Canada as the middleman. Washington wasn't even allowed to bid on scraps. The reaction inside the Pentagon was panic. Lockheed Martin froze development on its hypersonic missile program because the materials weren't available. Raytheon executives were reduced to cold-calling Canadian suppliers, begging for shipments. Even NASA admitted quietly that its satellite program was in jeopardy. America, the self-proclaimed global leader, had been checkmated by accountants in Ottawa. And the humiliation wasn't just about lost contracts, it was about credibility. For the first time in modern history, America's allies no longer trusted its leadership. For centuries, Greenland relied on Danish subsidies to survive. Independence was a fantasy, something future generations might dream of, but never see. That changed almost overnight. With Canadian-backed mining revenues pouring in, Greenland's parliament passed laws requiring foreign companies to hire locals, build infrastructure, and invest directly in communities. Airports, hospitals, and schools were suddenly funded not by foreign charity, but by Greenland's own wealth. In just a few years, a tiny population living on what many dismissed as a frozen wasteland had flipped the script, dictating terms to superpowers. Europe, watching all of this unfold, chose sides, and it wasn't with Washington. Denmark declared that any attempt to coerce Greenland would be considered an attack on NATO. Norway and France quietly deployed intelligence assets and naval patrols to back up Denmark's position. Even Poland, usually one of America's most loyal allies, froze in fear of being forced to pick between U.S. military aid and European solidarity. Trump had done what Moscow and Beijing spent decades trying and failing to do. He split NATO, not with foreign aggression, but with his own arrogance. This was never just about Greenland. It was about the collapse of American exceptionalism in the Arctic. For 80 years, Washington operated under one assumption: military might and economic pressure would always outweigh diplomacy and partnership. But the Arctic rewrote the rules. Contracts, trust, and relationships mattered more than aircraft carriers, and in this new game, Canada outmaneuvered America at every turn. Russian media mocked America's humiliation. Chinese think tanks published studies dissecting its collapse. And behind closed doors, even U.S. allies admitted they were secretly glad to see Washington humbled. America didn't lose the Arctic to enemies. It lost it to itself, to arrogance, short-term thinking, and a refusal to see the power of partnership. Canada didn't conquer Greenland. It earned Greenland's trust, and in doing so, Ottawa became the quiet empire of the North, a power broker no one can ignore. The lesson is brutal. In the 21st century, empires don't collapse because of enemy attacks. They collapse because of their own arrogance. Greenland, with just 56,000 people, proved it. They took America's license to lead in the Arctic and handed it to Canada. A silent revolution that reshaped global power without a single shot being fired. So here's the question. If America can lose the Arctic this easily, What other quiet conquests are happening right now, while Washington isn't even paying attention?